You ever notice how the cold changes sound? Out there, in the north woods of Minnesota, it's like the world holds its breath. Even your heartbeat feels louder than the wind. That's where I was the night it all began. Alone in a decommissioned logging camp miles from the nearest paved road. The thermometer outside the shack read 16 below, but it wasn't the kind of cold you measure in numbers. It was the kind that gets inside your bones and waits. I had a pot of coffee boiling over the wood stove, rifle propped by the door, and a laptop open to a message I probably should have deleted the moment it came through. It wasn't from a contact I recognized, no agency signature, no name, just a subject line that read, Wendigo Bounty, Classified Clearance Level 5. The body of the message was short. Coordinates. Payment details. A 6-figure promise and a clause about discretion. They knew who I was, where I'd been, and what I'd done before. I used to think I hunted for money. Truth is, I hunted because I couldn't stop. After Afghanistan, I told myself I was done chasing shadows. But once you've tracked something that shouldn't exist, a dogman in Michigan, a skinwalker down by Gallup, you stop trusting what the world tells you is real. You start believing in the quiet between breaths. The night that email came, I was trying to forget all that. I'd taken a break from field work. My last job had gone bad, real bad. 2 men missing, 1 body found without eyes, and me with a scar across my chest that still burned when it rained. But the Wendigo bounty, it didn't feel like a job. It felt like a test. The sender knew I wouldn't walk away. The wind outside shifted, brushing the cabin walls with soft fingers. The timbers creaked like they remembered pain. I walked to the window and looked out over the dark tree-line. Moonlight made the snow shimmer, untouched, perfect. But the silence, that was wrong. Not even the owls called. In the wilderness, silence means something's listening. I remember lighting a cigarette and watching the smoke curl toward the ceiling. My hand trembled more than I wanted to admit. Maybe it was the caffeine. Maybe it was the way the air seemed heavier every time I tried to breathe. I'd been alone out here for 3 days, testing my gear, prepping for the long trek north. Satellite maps, trail routes, signal flares, silver ammo, superstition, maybe, but I'd learned long ago it's better to insult a monster than underestimate it. I still hear that fire crackle sometimes when I close my eyes. I see the way the shadows danced across the walls, how the light warped the antlers nailed above the door. That cabin used to belong to a logging crew back in the 1920s. They'd cut timber for 2 winters before the company pulled out. Rumor was, they left after something started following them home at night. Something that knocked on their walls and whispered names they hadn't told anyone. I didn't believe in stories back then. Not really. I believed in tracks, in blood, in evidence you could touch. But belief's a fragile thing, especially when it starts whispering your name. Around midnight, I keyed my radio, just to check the signal strength. Static hissed back at me, soft and harmless. I ran through the test phrase like I'd done 1,000 times in the field. Unit 1, checking frequency, over. A beat of silence. Then, my own voice came back, perfect and delayed. Unit 1, checking frequency, over. I froze. There shouldn't have been an echo. Not out here. No other unit, no repeater tower, no backup crew. Just me. I turned the dial, adjusted the gain. The radio stayed dead quiet. My skin crawled. I tried again. Unit 1, copy if you hear me. Nothing. Then, from the trees outside, a voice answered. My voice. It was faint, warped by distance, but clear enough that I felt the breath leave my lungs. Every instinct screamed to turn off the light, grab the rifle, stay low. Instead, I stood there like an idiot, staring out the frosted window at the line of trees. The moonlight made everything silver, branches, snow, even the air. Unit 1, checking frequency, over. It said it again. Exactly the same cadence. Same rhythm. My own voice, thrown back at me. I remember whispering, "Who's out there?" But the words didn't feel like mine anymore. They drifted out of me, heavy and cold. The forest didn't answer, not at first. Then the wind started moving through the pines again, only this time it carried something softer underneath, a rhythm like breathing, low and human. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door. The cold slammed into me like a wall. My boots crunched the snow as I stepped out, breath clouding in the beam of light. The radio was still clipped to my vest, silent now. The trees looked closer than they had before, like they'd leaned in while I wasn't looking. You know that feeling when your mind starts making shapes in the dark? I saw one then. Just beyond the tree line, a figure. Too tall, too thin. Its skin the color of ash. I blinked, and it was gone. Unit 1, the voice whispered again, but this time it wasn't over the radio. It came from behind me. I spun, light slicing through the air, but there was only snow and shadow. The sound came again, closer. My heart slammed against my ribs. I raised the rifle, finger on the trigger, trying to aim at something that didn't have weight or warmth. That's when I realized the sound wasn't coming from the woods at all. It was coming from the cabin. I turned back toward the open door. Inside, the radio hissed, soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. I stepped forward, snow crunching under my boots. The warmth from the fire spilled out onto the porch, a sickly orange glow against the night. Then, through the static, my voice again, clear, calm, impossible. If you're hearing this, it said, run. The flashlight flickered. The fire inside popped, and something heavy shifted against the far wall, just out of view. I didn't move. Couldn't. The voice spoke again, quieter now. It's already too late. Every muscle in my body locked. The air tasted metallic, like blood on cold iron. The cabin door creaked open wider, and the warmth that spilled out didn't feel warm anymore. It felt alive. I remember thinking, this is how it begins. That was the first night I stopped believing in monsters you could kill. Because whatever was waiting in that cabin wasn't hunting me for food. It wanted something else, something I didn't even know I was offering. If you ever hear your own voice calling from the dark, don't answer. Because by the time you do, it's already wearing your face. We rode out before dawn, the snow still falling in thin, whispering veils that blurred the tree line and made the horizon look endless. The engines of our snowmobiles coughed and growled against the quiet, the headlights carving tunnels of light through the dark. I remember thinking how sound carried strangely out there, how even the hum of the motor seemed afraid to echo back. There were 4 of us on that job. Me, the linguist, Dr. Evelyn Cross, a quiet woman with sharp eyes and colder hands, a native tracker named Jonah Red Sky, and our government handler, the kind of man who looked like he'd never slept under real stars. Jonah led, map folded into his glove, eyes scanning every mark in the snow like he was reading a language the rest of us didn't know existed. The coordinates from that email had taken us deep into reservation borderland, dense birch and pine, a place the locals called the Hungerwood. Jonah didn't speak much during the ride, but when he did, it was never small talk. It's not the cold that'll kill you here, he said over the wind. It's the quiet. When it gets too quiet, it means the forest is watching back. By noon, the sun was nothing more than a dull coin behind the clouds. We set camp beside a frozen stream. Evelyn unpacked her equipment, thermal sensors, recorders, motion detectors, while I checked our rifles. Standard issue .308s, with 1 magazine swapped for silver rounds. A superstition, sure, but I'd learned that superstition kept men alive longer than pride. The first sign came before dusk. Jonah was scouting the western ridge when he called out, voice sharp through the radio, "You'll want to see this." We followed his tracks up a narrow slope and found a clearing. At first, I thought it was a hunting site. Blood streaked across the snow, dark as ink under the pale light. But it wasn't just blood, it was arranged. Spiraled, almost beautiful if you didn't understand what it meant. In the center lay the carcass of a deer, bones stripped clean and ribs twisted outward, like something had tried to climb out from inside. Evelyn crouched low, gloves trembling. "Whatever did this," she said, "it didn't eat for hunger." The handler took photos, cursed under his breath, and told us to move on. But Jonah stayed staring at the pattern. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "That's not just killing," he said. "That's invitation." By nightfall, the temperature dropped to 20 below. The forest was dead still. Even the snow stopped falling. We built a fire between the snowmobiles, the glow barely enough to hold back the dark. I remember the smell of burning pine resin and diesel fumes, the taste of coffee gone bitter from the cold. Evelyn sat across from me, jotting notes by the flicker of her lantern. She looked calm, but her eyes darted toward the trees every few seconds. "Animals act different here," she murmured. Even the silence feels constructed. Jonah didn't answer. He was carving something into a small piece of wood, symbols I didn't recognize. When I asked what they meant, he said, "Names that shouldn't be spoken, so we write them instead." Around midnight, the handler went to relieve himself near the tree-line. He came back pale and shaking, claiming he'd seen a shape watching him from the dark. Tall, thin, with eyes that reflected like glass. I didn't believe him at first. Night plays tricks. But then Jonah rose to his feet, slowly, like a man hearing his own funeral bell. "You didn't look at it, did you?" he asked. The handler just stared. "I don't know what I looked at." Jonah tossed the carved wood into the fire. It cracked and spat. "Then pray it doesn't look back."
We didn't sleep that night.
Around 2 in the morning, the thermal sensors began to beep, something moving, low and fast, circling the camp. I grabbed my rifle, switched off the safety, and scanned through my scope.
Nothing. No heat, no sound.
Just the feeling of being studied by something that understood patience better than fear. Evelyn adjusted her recorder, listening to the playback through her headset.
Then she froze.
There's a voice on the loop," she whispered.
None of us spoke.
We crowded around her laptop. The sound was faint at first, static, then a low murmur, like wind caught in a bottle. Then words soft and cracked, "Jonah. Jonah, please help me."
Jonah went still.
His hand trembled against the barrel of his rifle. "That's my wife," he said, voice breaking. "She died last winter." The handler tried to pull him back, but Jonah was already walking toward the sound. "It's just mimicry," I said, but the words sounded hollow, even to me. He stopped at the edge of the trees.
"Maya," he called out.
"Maya, is that you?" No one answered. The forest swallowed his voice whole. Evelyn's recorder hissed louder, a rush of static that drowned everything else. I shouted his name, started forward, but the handler grabbed my arm.
"Let him," he said.
"He won't believe you if you stop him." Jonah disappeared into the fog.
Minutes passed. 10, maybe 20.
Then his rifle cracked once, a single shot that echoed too long. I ran before anyone could stop me. The fog was thick enough to choke on, the flashlight beam cutting no more than a few feet ahead. I called for him, but all I got was silence. Then I saw it, the rifle lying half buried in the snow, steam rising from the barrel.
Still warm.
No footprints around it.
No drag marks, no blood.
Just a perfect ring of untouched snow, like the world had erased him cleanly. Behind me, the forest sighed. It sounded almost human. When I turned back toward camp, Evelyn was shouting for me to come back, her voice cracked and distant. But something else was whispering between the trees, soft, familiar, and wrong.
It was Jonah.
He was calling my name. Only, his voice came from everywhere at once. I backed away slowly, rifle raised, the fog swallowing my breath. The whispers multiplied, layered like echoes in a cave. Some sounded like Jonah. Others didn't sound human at all. I don't remember running, just the feeling of the snow giving way under my boots, the flashlight swinging wild. When I burst back into the clearing, the fire had nearly burned out. The handler stared into the dark, face white as bone. Evelyn's recorder still played the same static loop, Jonah's wife calling, then silence, then breathing. We didn't speak until dawn. By then, the snow had covered everything. No tracks, no sign, not even the imprint where Jonah's rifle had been. When I finally whispered, it wasn't for anyone to hear. "The snow had no footprints," I said. But something had taken him. And in that frozen hush, I swear the forest answered. Not in words, not in sound, but in something colder, older, that crawled inside my head and stayed there, waiting for me to believe.
By the second morning, the cold had started whispering in places our voices couldn't reach. The frost bloomed on the inside of our tents, turning the fabric into thin sheets of glass. When I stepped out, my breath hung in the air longer than it should have. The trees looked different, closer somehow, bent inward like they were leaning in to hear what we might say next. Evelyn stood by the half-buried snowmobile, brushing frost off the map board. The handler, his name was Mason, was already pacing, muttering about extraction codes and satellite interference. I could tell he was unraveling. His pupils twitched every time the wind changed. We'd lost Jonah barely a day ago, and no one had said his name since. "We go north another 4 miles, Evelyn said. "The coordinates intersect an old service route, something government built. Might be a station or an outpost." I nodded, though the idea of going deeper made something in my gut tighten. But orders were orders, even when they came from ghosts. The snow thickened by midday. The trail markers we left the day before had vanished, as if swallowed. Mason's GPS blinked nonsense. Zeros and question marks across the screen. We rode in silence, except for the groan of the engines and the distant crack of shifting ice. When we reached the ridge, the forest opened into a bowl of white and shadow. At the bottom, we found what used to be a line of traps, rusted steel jaws chained to splintered posts. Bones filled them, not animal but human. Fingers, mostly, pale and brittle, chewed to splinters. Evelyn crouched beside one and brushed snow away from a half-buried skull. Its teeth marks were wrong, too wide, too jagged. Human, she whispered, but not sane. A few yards away, Mason kicked something loose from the snow. A metal case, military green, stenciled with faded letters. U.S. Biological Research, Site 41. Inside, wrapped in frostbitten canvas, lay a small leather logbook. I opened it carefully, the pages stiff with cold. The handwriting was military neat, each entry stamped with dates from 1953. Subject, Project Hunger. The more I read, the colder I felt. It wasn't folklore they were studying, it was infection. The entries spoke of neurological possession vectors, symbiotic hunger, and host integration events. The last page was torn halfway down, but I could still read enough. Symptoms include mimicry, heightened predation instinct, and extreme regenerative tissue response. Recommend termination of. The ink ended there. Evelyn took the book, flipping through it fast, her breath fogging the pages. They were trying to weaponize it, she murmured. Not hunt it. They wanted to make soldiers that didn't need to eat or rest. Mason swore, throwing a handful of snow. That's insane. You can't weaponize whatever the hell this is. Tell that to the bones, I said. We stayed there too long. The sun never rose higher than the treetops, and when the shadows lengthened, the air felt thicker, heavier, like something was breathing under the snow. Evelyn found carvings on a birch trunk nearby. Old Ojibwe script, deep and deliberate. She traced her glove along the grooves, reading them softly. Feed it once, and it never leaves your blood. Meaning what? Mason asked. She looked at him, eyes hollow. Meaning someone fed it. We made camp in the lee of the ridge, using the burned-out hull of an old supply shack for shelter. The walls were cracked, but they kept the wind out. We built a fire with splintered boards and tried to act like the heat meant safety. Mason refused to sleep inside. He stayed by the snowmobiles, rifle across his lap, eyes darting toward the tree line. He kept checking his watch, muttering about radio silence and extraction windows. I didn't blame him. I couldn't sleep either. Every gust of wind sounded like someone walking just beyond the edge of the firelight. Sometime after midnight, I heard voices. Low, muffled, like someone whispering through glass. I thought at first it was Evelyn talking in her tent, but when I looked, she was sitting upright, headphones on, recording something. The sound was coming from Mason's direction. He was still sitting by the snowmobiles, chin on his chest, asleep. But his voice was speaking from somewhere else. Unit 2 reporting, he murmured. Coordinates locked. We found the nest. I stood frozen. He was asleep, but the words kept coming. Steady, clipped, too precise to be dreams. Containment compromised, he said. Subject is aware. Terminate handlers. My skin prickled. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it at him. His eyes snapped open. What are you doing? He barked. You were talking, I said. No, I wasn't. Evelyn stepped out of her tent, recorder in hand. You were, she whispered. And it wasn't your voice. He started to argue, but then his radio crackled. His voice again, echoing through static. Unit 2, reporting. Mason threw the radio into the snow and stomped it flat. That's some kind of trick. Some damn interference. But there was no signal out here. Nothing to bounce off. The only thing transmitting was us. The fire sputtered low. Snow began to fall again. Heavy this time, soundless. Evelyn retreated into her tent, mumbling translations from the carvings. Mason and I stayed by the fire, rifles across our knees, saying nothing. Around 2, he dozed off again. I should have stayed awake. I should have known better. When I woke, the fire was ash and the world was blue with dawn. Mason's chair was empty. His rifle lay half buried beside it, safety off, magazine half spent. His footprints led toward the ridge, only they didn't go far. Halfway down the slope, the snow had collapsed into a hollow. At first, I thought it was a sinkhole. Then I saw the ice. Something beneath it. Something pale, twisted, frozen solid. It was his face. Not his body, just his face, pressed from below. Mouth open, as if screaming into the ice. Evelyn's voice broke behind me. "It's using us," she said. "Every sound, every breath. It's feeding." The words barely reached me. My stomach had turned to stone. The ice around Mason's frozen mouth shimmered faintly, and for a second I thought it moved. We burned the logbook that night. Every page. The flames turned blue, hissing like something alive. Evelyn said a prayer in a language I didn't know. We didn't speak after that. Not much to say when the forest starts learning your voice. Later, when she finally slept, I sat alone with my recorder. I turned it off, made sure the light was dead, and set it beside me. Then, through the quiet, a faint click. The light came back on. Playback mode. And from the speaker, my voice. Containment compromised. Subject is aware. I stared at it until the batteries burned out. But even after the red light died, the voice kept talking.